Actually, I don't think that's in the video. We can put it in the video. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about how we train. This weapon is cleared, it's safe, and we're going to be talking a little bit about trigger control. We're going to be talking about how we position our fingers for the fastest reload, and how, in general, we can train shooting without breaking the bank. Dry firing is fine, but there's nothing like putting rounds downrange and actually seeing your training in action. So, let's get going. This is so that we can talk about finger positioning. Normally, when I shoot, I have my finger up along, well, of course I have my finger on the trigger, and when I pulled the trigger, I usually have my thumb on this side of the stock so that I can easier and faster come up for a reload. When on the rifle, if you're standing or if you're in prone or if you're kneeling, whatever, it's a lot easier and a lot faster to get back onto your trigger when you have your finger out on the side. That's what I feel. And one of the things that I also want to talk about is there are just as many different ways of doing stuff that there are shooters doing it. You got to find out what works for you. What works for me doesn't necessarily work for you. So you got to try out different styles. You got to try out different ways of gripping your gun. You got to try out different styles of grips. You got to try out different styles of charge handles. You got to try out different styles of stocks. I have this one modified, the Ruger American Precision Rimfire. As stock does not come with a cheek riser that I feel is high enough for me, so I modified this, put a little bit of foam on the back, and that's raised it up plenty for me to be happy with it. When we're in the prone, we also, or I at least, have a tendency to use a squeeze bag. And squeeze bags come in a variety of different shapes and sizes and hardnesses and how much they're filled. This is a bag that I have made. This is actually an ELR-Precision original. This is my Genesis bag. This is the first bag I made, and I still use it because it fulfills everything I want it to fulfill. It can be really flat, it can be really high, and you go even higher, or it could be whatever you want in between. So this is filled with actually insulation balls. It's flamingo, højrekugler in Danish. You put it underneath houses in Europe, or in Denmark at least, to insulate the floor from the ground underneath, because most houses in Denmark have floor heating, so all the heating's in the floor, and that's really nice, and we need to keep the heat out. Anyway, I digress. But that's what's inside this. That makes it really, really light, and that of course can lead to an issue with it blowing away. I haven't experienced that because usually I have it underneath my bag or underneath my rifle. And some guys like to run rear bags. Some like to run the monopod on the back. I have both. I use the monopod as a bag rider if I don't use the monopod itself. And on the front, usually we have a set of legs. This is the Magpul set of legs. Not the most stable leg in the world, especially not when it gets out here. It's really wonky and moves around a lot, but it's lightweight. And for this rifle, when using a rifle where you need to be on the rifle and hold the rifle up for competition in rimfire shooting, you want something that's relatively light and something that you can fold up and get out of the way, that actually still would work as a handguard or as a grip. I usually have my grip in here, but that's also different from shooter to shooter. What I'm trying to say is that there are as many different ways of doing legs, bipods, monopods, rear bags, again, as there are shooters doing it. A rear bag is, to me, really important because it stabilizes the shot. Up front you have your bipod that stabilizes your system up front. In the back, if you try to ride your rifle on your arm, which is fine if you are kind of in a hurry, then your muscle and your tissue is going to move around for you. You're going to have small movements in your tissue, you're going to have small movements in your muscle, and that's going to mean that the rifle moves around for you, because muscle is squidgy. It's not solid, whereas a squeeze bag, when you have that loaded, that's relatively solid. And when that's up against something, then you have a really good position to put your rifle on. If you don't have anything else, sure, your arm is better than nothing. But a rear bag that's lightweight, I've done this with Molly, so that you can put it outside on your system. I'm not trying to sell this right now, I might in the future, but not right now. I just think that's smart, because then I can put it on my backpack on a carabiner and basically forget about it, because it's not that light or it's not that heavy. So it just sits there for whenever I need it. I can also, with the Mully, I can put that onto one of my legs. All of a sudden I have a front rest for this to rest on. If I'm on a stage or a firing position that calls for this to be up front instead of in the back, that also gives me the opportunity to have that up front. So again, there are as many different ways of doing this as there are shooters that do it. Find out what works for you and go with that. The thing I can recommend the most is see as many different instructionals as possible. Don't just go with one. Try out some different stuff, and also don't abandon it the first hour or two if it doesn't seem to work for you. A buddy of mine was complaining about the stuff that his instructor was telling him was making him less accurate at the range. He was shooting a 5.56 out of a M4 style AR, and when he was corrected by his instructor, he was annoyed by his accuracy falling. And what he was telling me was that he just kind of squeezed off the shot when he felt that the red dot was on his target. That might be very good in a CQB type situation, but for long range and for long distance shooting, you kind of want to have a controlled trigger pull and a controlled controlled breathing. That's a totally different video. Everything is kind of important that you control, and if you try something and feel that it's less accurate, give it a fortnight, give it 14 days. Try it out, use it, see if you can get with it. If it's still less effective than what you were doing before, go back to what you're doing before. Sometimes muscle memory can be hard to get rid of, and when muscle memory is interfering with what the new stuff your instructor has told you, or the new stuff you learned on YouTube or been told by a buddy or whatever, when your muscle memory is interfering with that, then that also means that your new way of trying to do stuff is foiled by yourself. So don't abandon it just because it doesn't work immediately. Some stuff works immediately. Some stuff like trigger control works immediately. We've listened to a lot of where you want your finger on your trigger, that you don't want it all the way in here, you don't want it all the way out here. You kind of want it right in a sweet spot, right where the right where that cushiony part of the finger is, right there. And that's because you have a better feeling with the trigger when you have your finger in there. And also having your trigger finger the same place on your trigger every time is not only important for pistols, it is also quite important for long range. It's not as important because all of our parameters are more set that they are with a pistol, but still try and get that same feeling. And if you want to, you can try and put a piece of tape on both sides of where you want your trigger, and then always try and get your finger there, and then build up that muscle memory with those two pieces of tape that just only allows a sliver of your finger to be open or exposed. That way you'll be able to feel, you won't be able to feel where the paper is, but you're going to be able to feel where the tape isn't, and thereby you can find where it is you want your finger and start building up a muscle memory so you always get your finger the same place. This is a 22, and we've been out shooting. We've shot 650 yards with it, or 600 meters. I don't often do that because, as you see some of the other tubers do, you might be able to get a round on a steel gong at 1,000 meters, but how many shots have you had prior to getting that one hit? What I experienced when I was doing 2 mile was that my .338 can get to 2 mile. It can get to 3.7 kilometers, which is more than 2 mile, but I'm not consistent at that distance. So what I did and what I do now is I dial it back, and then I don't usually shoot at more than about 2.4 kilometers, because that's kind of the edge of what my .338 Lapua with a 300 grain Lapua Skinar bullet or projectile, that's kind of the limit of where it's consistent. So I don't usually go further out than that. I'm looking into getting a .375 Shaytek. It'd be great if Victrix would sponsor one of you for me. That'd be cool. Because the .375 is a heavier bullet and thereby carries more energy. Again, I digress. The 22 is plenty effective out to around 350, 400 meters ish. It's not consistent, but out of a 10 shot mag, or 15 I think I had in it, I had at least 5 or 6 hits at 312 meters. And that was with a CCI standard velocity round, which is not the best round in the world. This rifle runs really good with ELI match ammo. That's another thing for another video. Maybe check that out on my ELR-Precision 22. The different manufacturers have different bullets for the 22, and because you cannot load for your 22, or you can, some people do, I don't have that much time, then you got to find the bullet that your 22 likes, not the other way around. You can't fine tune your bullet to the barrel, you got to find the bullet that's good for that barrel. That can be different from this Ruger American 22 rimfire to another sister of it, to a different one. Exactly the same. It can be very, very different which one or which ammunition the rifle prefers. So what I'm trying to say is find the limit of your system, find the capacity of where you're consistent, and then don't go further than that. You can go further than that for fun, but do not try and make a .338 into a King of 2 mile gun, because it's not. It's a really good King of 1 mile gun. That caliber is really, really good at 1 mile, and it's consistent at 1 mile. But it's not a King of 2 mile gun. I think we're going to do a whole video on bags. I think we're going to do a whole video on where to have your head, and also the adjustment of the rear to you is quite important. Yeah, I hope this made sense and that you could use some of it. So until next time, stay tuned and stay safe.